welcome to Beauties and Beasties, the independent pest podcast for the UK.
Hello. How are we doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm okay, thank you. I'm afraid tonight we've had a few issues, as it were. So you're going to have to bear with me, and I'm really sorry to everybody, but you've got the old man tonight, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and that's because after such a phenomenal backlash to Sean's joke last week about me leaving, he decided the only thing to do would be to take some time off to repent for his sins. So he's sat at the moment contemplating what he's done on the... No, I'm just kidding.
No, he's been locked in a sweat box somewhere.
That's it, yeah. He's been locked away. He's been put on the naughty step for a week. No, I was kind of hoping he was on. I was trying to sort of like think of something funny to do to get him back for last week.
Yeah.
That's about the limit of what I've got in me.
So Luciano was going to come on as well, and he's fortunately he's on standby for his wife having a baby.
Yes.
So he didn't think it was a good idea to say, "Love, just hold on. I've got a podcast to do." So bless him and bless his wife. Hope everything goes well. Sean's had a kiddie. He hasn't had a kiddie. His kids are ill as well, so he's had to take time off. So you got me, like it or lump it, leave. You know, sorry, and all that.
We'd love having you on. And you sat like you look really professional there, but this is your little cabin up on the farm, isn't it, that you're sat in?
Yeah, this is my little cabin. I've got my little mate beside me. Look.
Oh, is that your stuffed rat?
Randolph.
Randolph.
We've got Randolph the rat beside me, and we've got I've got my little display of Wallace and Gromit. So my little Airfix model I made of Wallace and Gromit, and we've got our little friends from Defenders Bird Spikes. We got our Squabby. And
I've got mine up on the wall as well in my little office. Where I have it up there with pride.
Got Roland up there as well. So yeah, like a proper Sado pesto.
Oh, I think we all have just a curiosity shelf, don't we? Like weird things that you find. Like one of the things I've got on the desk is a bumblebee nest, like, which is really cool. So I'm like I think it was Mandy managed to sort of like dig it out of the floor intact and just presented it to me in a shoebox, and I've cherished it. It's absolutely amazing. Have
you seen the rather? I wouldn't say he's strange, because I find him absolutely hilarious. The guy that makes rather strange things out of rats.
Oh, I think I know the guy you're talking about, but like he like makes little coin purses and sort of like garments out of them. It's absolutely.
I've got to get this week. He had a set of rat bollocks in resin.
Why would you ever need something like that?
Why not? He had a pair of rat's nuts in resin, and he also had a mouse's arsehole in resin. Well, in a star shape resin.
It would make for an interesting paperweight, wouldn't it? Certainly a talking point over tea.
Chinese badge.
Dear. I'm trying to think of what the weirdest thing I've got in my little collection is. I've got loads of sort of like little preserved samples of funny bugs that I've got places, but I certainly don't have anything quite like that. I've got some really cool rat skulls in resin, actually. Quite fun. I think actually, probably the weirdest bit in my collection is I've got a rat who, out of a like chicken farm, its teeth basically misaligned. And I've used this one in talks so often. If any like, yeah, and the teeth, it looks like the Gruffalo. So the bottom teeth are out round this, and the top teeth are out round that. And you can actually see where the teeth have gone so far round, it started to sort of like scratch its own skull again. Absolutely mad. And the only reason it survived so long like that, we imagine, is because it was in a chicken farm. It was basically eating really soft, like probably damp chicken feet. So basically eating porridge, because otherwise it would have perished a long, long time ago. But it was amazing. I use it in like all of my talks. It's like my cherished little possession because it's just so crazy.
Rat soup. It was drinking rats. Do you have a little straw?
It didn't need a straw. It looks like a warthog. Like, it's so mad. That's cool. I'm trying to think what else I've got. Oh no, there we go. Had a good week. How are the wasps? Like, this is a question for you actually, because this came up a couple of times in conversations with people this week. Wasps and Vulcan. How have you been finding that?
We haven't done many wasp nests yet. We're just starting now. We're just rolling now. So we shall soon find out. But having used Cupex dust in the past, which was permethrin, I found it not very good.
It does require a completely different mindset and approach to like wasp control. And it's going to be really interesting to see. Okay, we're going to have lots of not complaining, but we're going to have a lot of sort of like
questions,
misfires, I think, and questions. But what I'm personally excited to see at the end of this year is when all of this dust settles after this first learning curve. It's going to be so exciting to see how people work around it. You know, what the strategies are that people put in place, how people sort of like work on this. Are people going to start drilling more exploratory holes? We're going to see more people using sort of like little boroscopes to see where the animals are. Are we going to have a more involved, or are we going to sort of like just see that people drill down to the, you know, selling a 2 or 3 part treatment? How is this going to work? And that's the bit that excites me, just seeing the ingenuity of the industry overcoming this particular challenge.
I think that this year, I don't think it'll be this year. I think it'll be next year. I think that there'll be quite a few people with, shall we call it, reserves, for want of a better word. And already we have had people say to us, "Oh, that's too much. Don't you guarantee it? The other guy does, and he's half the price you are." And you're like,
yes, and we will see some of that. Yes. Whatever could you mean, sir? That can't last forever. I mean, and honestly, it's unsustainable. You only need to get caught out once, and that's it. That's it done. Like I say, I'm not going to focus on those who are going to try and sort of like do the whole Volcam thing. I genuinely want to see those who dip into the rest of our catalogue, and I'm not just talking chemicals here, I'm talking all of the sundries we have, to find some really innovative solutions.
As we're going off on a bit of a trail there, I just want to say well done to one of our guys who passed their Principles of Rodent Control this week, Steve Killing, which is great. You know, he passed, which is absolutely excellent. But I think, again, with qualifications, why don't they let us know what we actually got wrong, if we got anything wrong? Because
so I can say that from one perspective, which is when you look at it in isolation of just one person, it would be great to know what you got right and what you got wrong, so you can basically fill those gaps in and those knowledge gaps. But bear in mind that you've got a nation of people, or maybe even sort of like 4 or 5 people from a company doing that same exam. Now, if you let them know what they got right and not what they wrong, and then you had one guy fail because they only refresh the exam papers every couple of months to every quarter, if you have 5 guys, this is the thing. Like,
I'm absolutely sure he got 100% right, because we trained him. So I'm sure that he got 100% right. But saying that, if you did have a tech and say the pass rate is 70%,
I think it's 17 out of 25 for the safe use.
Okay, so say it's 70%. Does that mean to say that you're letting somebody go out with that's only 70% knowledgeable?
It's not 70% knowledgeable, because you can get 100% and still have gaps in your knowledge, can't you? So it's no guarantee of full It just shows that you have sufficient competency to apply
Yeah.
redemption safely.
I'm just
And
thinking
that's
it'd be nice to know so that you could drill down on that area.
absolutely, don't disagree that when it comes to moving forwards and future training, etc., but you've got to think about it from the examiner's point of view, which is you say these are the right answers and these are the wrong answers. Then you look through everyone else's and say, oh, they got that one right, and so that's the right answer. So when they redo the test, there is this opportunity to defraud the system, and so it kind of does make sense that they can't release them. But there's nothing to be said that when unfortunately, because it goes into a bank of things, so the same questions do and often do occasionally
Yeah,
pop
yeah,
up.
they have for
And
years. They have. There's only so many
yeah.
questions you can ask.
Oh, yeah, exactly that. There is a limited range of things that you can ask. The only thing I can think of, realistically speaking, is to get yourself a copy of that exam paper, have a look at it, and then use those as training questions going forwards. And you do your own research and you make
Yeah, yeah,
sure
yeah.
what you teach them is correct, and that's no problem. That's just basically you making sure that you've got everything at your ability. But yeah, it's a
Yeah,
funny one. I don't disagree that because I, as you well know, used to do the ones, twos, threes, do a lot of the training, and we would have folks come in and they would get, let's say, you need X amount to pass. Let's just say 70% for the sake of example. You need 70%. They get 60%, and so they assume, oh, these are the questions I got wrong. So they come in and they redo the exam, and it's the same exam paper because they're redoing it within a couple of weeks' time, a month's time, and actually they come out with a worse grade because they assumed that the ones that they got right were the ones that they got wrong, and the ones they got wrong were the ones they got right, and so they changed the wrong answers around rather than just. And so, yeah, there is an element of if you know where your gaps are, then you can
yeah.
better focus on getting that training correct. But I mean, that's why you go and use professional trainers and professional outlets, because they should be able to then steer you in the right direction going forwards. Now, this is an interesting one. Okay, we're going off topic. We are going to talk about behavioral
We are
resistance.
going to. We are.
Sorry, just before we go any further, I'm just going to put into the chat. Boop, this is the code for joining us live on StreamYard tonight. Okay, so that's going up on Facebook and YouTube right now, and I'll just log on and I'll put it on the LinkedIn in just a minute. What we'd like is when we're talking about behavioural resistance tonight, you can either put your experiences in the chat, which will be great, or alternatively, if you want to come on and you want to talk about some instances where you also have experienced behavioural resistance, click the code. It'll kick you into the green room, and we will bring you in and we'll interview you as we go along. And it's not that scary, guys. Everyone that has ever been on this podcast has said actually how fun it is. So don't for one second think that we're going to sort of like ridicule and make fun of you. Come on, join us. Let's talk about behavior resistance. Those on LinkedIn who are listening now, it's just about to appear on your feed any second. But while I do that, so Susan has mentioned you can't beat on the job experience first before the training, and
Mhm.
I completely agree. So we have our level 2 safe use, that's your 1 day multiple choice exam, and then we have our level 2 award, which is considered why you got your hand up there, where you got the hand up.
Level 2 basic use.
Okay, level 2 basic use, and whatever your safe use or identified, your basic use,
Basic use.
basic use. So with that, you've got that, and then we've got our level 2 award, which we consider to be the mainstay of our industry. Now, a lot of companies will take someone on brand new, fresh off the mill, fresh off the back of the turnip truck, and instantly try and put them through the level 2 award, which has got a lot of legislation in there. It's got a lot of rodent knowledge. It's got a huge amount of insect knowledge, which you may not be experienced to. So actually, yes, I fully agree with this, and I think this is where your basic use, as you say, is fantastic, because you get that technician in, you give them the basic use, and then also you find an independent trainer to give them a basic use of insecticides as well, which, although at the moment is not mandated, is very good practice. You then have them compliant and safe, inverted commas, to go out and do jobs. And then for 6 to 8 months, even a year, get that training, get that on the job experience, get that person,
Absolutely.
you know, entrenched in our industry, because if you make it a year, as we all know, you're in it for life, and then put them onto the level 2 award to get their full thing in there. So actually, this is where we all bitch and moan about. I'm going to call it the safe use. I've always got the safe use. You know, we bitch and moan about the safe
yeah, it's just me being correct.
Yeah, okay. But, you know, we bitch and moan about the safe use being sort of like too easy, but actually, it should be the stepping stone. It should be for employers to say, right, I have confidence that that person going out is going to, if you know, not do it badly. Not necessarily not teaching them how to do it well. You're just teaching them how to not do it badly, or how, you know, the pitfalls there, and then they learn. It's like driving. But yeah, Hugh,
It was always the way that we, with Rent-to-Kill, big up Rent-to-Kill, I'm afraid. You would do your basic training from day one. You would do your 6 weeks training with technicians, and then after 6 months, you would then go to Fell Court for a week's in-house training. Then, and everything sort of then dropped into place, because you've done it, and you thought, oh yeah, that's what that was. Yeah, so I would absolutely say that for those that do their level 2 award in pest management in a week, and then go out on their own, and they've only been doing it 2 or 3 weeks, it must be like, Jesus Christ, what was that all about? I have no idea what that was all about. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is the weird thing, because this is half the problem. If we called it the level 1, none of these problems would have occurred. Actually, in reality, if we'd gone back to day 0 when we were doing these things and the RSPH picked this up, if the RSPH had called the level 2 the level 3, because the level 2 safe use, or the level 2 basic use, is a level 2. Our level 2 award is significantly more advanced than that. But unfortunately, it misses just some little caveats to officially make it a level 3. So if we had a magic wand and we could go back in time, we would have just instantly given that a level 3. And that's where the problem we are now, because we can't push everything down, because that devalues us. But unfortunately, the qualifying agents aren't allowing us to just magically push everything up either. So we're left in this situation where we're going to have to find a bridge. And okay, in order to continue trading, you don't have to bridge, but you can bridge if you want. And yes, this comes all the way back. Terry mentions you got your diploma 1 and 2. This goes back to days before RSPH, when it was all industry led, and we could call it what we, you know, you could call it diploma, and then we gifted it over to the RSPH, and unfortunately we got stuck in the wrong bracket. So there we go. But and this is how I'm going to segue into this, because when we do our level 2 training, or even our safe use, our basic use, and then we move on to our level 2 award, or even to our level 2 severe, we only cover, you know, the basics of resistance, and the basics of resistance that we do cover is almost exclusively focused around a little bit around the invertebrates, where we talk about PBO and and insect growth regulators, and only in sort of like terms of what's an IGR and what does PBO stand for. And then when we talk about rodents, we kind of hyperfixate on this genetic resistance that we're dealing with, the resistance to the multi-feed second generations. So with that, it's a very sort of like thin veneer of understanding that we have, and yet I don't think, and those in the comments, and even you might prove me wrong, I don't think there's anyone out there that hasn't experienced either behavioral or genetic resistance in their times in pest management. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, so the problem, also the fact is that I might be going a bit askew, but I've always found that it might be changing, you see, the biggest excuse for failure to control a rodent population is people saying, oh, well, they're resistant.
Yes.
Specifically rodenticide resistant, not behavioural resistance. Oh, yeah, well, they're resistant. No, they're not resistant. You're just not doing your job properly. I don't know what the figures are in that. Like, you know, are they really resistant? It's you are failing to find the source the focus of the infestation. You are failing to use all the tools at your control. You are failing to knock down the population and go out further. It's not that they're resistant at all, but I would imagine that when you do come across that resistance and you've tried everything, it must be very frustrating.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So from my time sat in the manufacturing sphere, you do get a lot of, you get a lot of phone calls saying your product doesn't work, it doesn't. And I'm not just talking UK, I'm talking globally here. You have people phoning up saying what you've sold us something that doesn't work, resistance. We once even got a case where we were told that the Brodifacoum that you had sold doesn't work. It must be resistant, and absolutely not. That's not a question. But there are multiple factors that can lead to control failure, and it is a convenient crutch at times to blame this boogeyman in the closet, which is resistance, because resistant animals look a lot like susceptible animals.
Somebody must have had renticle training, Sean. Underestimation of the size of the population.
No, that's our Sean. That's absolutely our Sean. That's our Sean. That's our Sean. But he's right. There's a host of control failures that can occur before resistance is an issue. But it's not always a convenient. It's not always true. But I would say that there is an element of convenience in blaming this boogeyman. But that being said, I believe that there's a lot more resistance, both behavioural and genetic. Now, I'm going to ask you now, have you experienced behavioural resistance? And no matter what answer you give, I'm going to tell you you're wrong.
So first, I would say that, again, I'm going to big up Renticle, I'm afraid. We actually were categorically taught like the 6 or 7 reasons why you're failing to control an issue. And we had them off pat. Failure to underestimation of the size of the population, failure to locate and treat all harborages. And they were like boom, 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 which I don't believe that you do in your level 2. But personally, we haven't really come across behavioural resistance. No, until this week.
Until this week. No, but I'll say, just yesterday, you have experienced a form of behavioural resistance before. And this is it. This is all down to terminologies and the rest of it. Because yes, neophobia is a form of transient resistance. It is a deviation from what you would consider to be normal behaviour. So that's transient resistance. So before we talk about your experience, we have our first guest in the green room at the bottom. So let's bring on Susan, who's hopefully going to tell us a story about her experiences with behavioural resistance, and then we'll see how they match up to yours today. So hey Susan, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you both?
Fine, thanks.
Very well. So
you have to forgive me, I'm hot and sweaty because it's really hot here.
Oh, it's hot and muggy. There's a thunderstorm threatening outside, and I am praying, and I mean praying, that it comes rumbling in any second now to take all of the mugginess out of the air.
Can I just say, you aren't the only ones that actually have the weird and wonderful stuff. Me too.
We absolutely all have it. Are you even a pest controller unless you have found something interesting on the floor and put it in your kit bag or your pocket to show your mates later on?
I pick up cockroaches and all sorts.
Excellent stuff. So, Susan, go on, tell us, what has been your experience with behavioural resistance?
Right, I was at a maltings, and as you can imagine, there is food aplenty there. And basically going round the site, I was sorry, my doorbell. I was finding that it didn't matter what I did, I could try every bait imaginable, they would not go in a plastic bait box at all. And I was starting to lose my mind thinking, how the hell am I going to get these? They were just getting more and more, and I'm thinking, what on earth do I do? I could only get a few in traps. So, I got to the end of my tether, and funnily enough, I actually had a conversation with you, Alex, about it, if you remember. Thinking, what on earth am I going to do? And one of the things I did is I actually looked up online. I literally trawled the internet and found, I can't remember where the article was from, but it was talking about trying different types of places to put bait. And I ended up using cardboard bait boxes.
Yeah.
And I literally only had to put cardboard bait boxes down and absolutely mullered them. They just went in and...
Whatever happened to cardboard trays? That's all we ever had, cardboard trays and cardboard boxes.
I mean, the great thing is you know, because they're so disposable, you're then getting rid of traces of pheromone and all sorts, you know, and starting again each time. Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that, so my understanding of behavior resistance, and I've looked into this a fair amount because I find a whole resistance thing fascinating, is there's a couple of different types of behavior resistance. And I like behavior resistance is one of these umbrella terms that we use, a bit like neophobia. We use the term neophobia, but the term neophobia actually means several different behaviors that we see. And so we can have behavior resistance, which is innate. So that is, that animal is almost born with that knowledge, or it is passed on through hereditary action. And I'll give you a really good example of that in a little bit to do with, you know, mother's milk. But the one that, you know, I think we encounter most often is a learned behavior. An animal encounters an object or a stimulus that instantly then has a negative effect. And that negative, because all mammals, you've got to think about this. Hang on, just in a second here, because all life on Earth is driven to do one thing. And if you want to think about this really cynically, we humans, all life on Earth, are a vessel for our genes. That's all we are. If you want to think about this really cynically, we are just big meat machines to carry genetic material through time. Now, the fact that we invented cinemas and apple cider vinegar and, you know, the internet is completely beside the point. All we are is just a vehicle to move this genetic material through time and space. And as such, we have this ingrained, like, behavior to survive, to move on to the next level, to pass that genetic material along. And you are one of a very long line of genetic sort of like predecessors that goes back 4 billion years or so. So with that, we have this drive to stay alive, which means that we are hyper focused on the things that are bad for us as opposed to the things that are good for us. If, for example, I ask both of you now, when was the last time you had food poisoning? Either of you?
It
When
was
was
a
the last
long
time you had
time ago.
Okay, it's a long
A
time
long
ago.
time ago.
Yeah, I've been
But can
into
you tell me what it was that gave you food poisoning a long time ago?
Indian.
Oh,
Indian?
do you know what? I don't think I can even remember.
Oh, Lordy. So
Genuinely can't remember. It's been that long ago.
Okay, most people who ask this question, they'll say, oh yes, I got food poisoning 6 years ago and it was a chicken madras out in Thailand, or, you know, I was on a holiday in Corfu and it was something like that. Most people can remember that negative stimulus very well. But if I ask you what was the best chocolate cake you ever ate in your life, you'd probably be like, I will have no idea. I know I like chocolate cake, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the best one. We are fixated on remembering the things that have the capacity to cause us damage. And we live 80 years and we will remember this for 40 years. That mouse lives for 2 years. And so it's not difficult to assume that it's going to have, as soon as it builds that negative stimulus, it's with it to the day that it dies. So I think this is where behavioral resistance really starts to creep in. Anyway, I've filibustered enough. Hugh, you had your hand up about an hour and a half
I was going to say, you need to wind back in time
Wind back
to the 80s and big phones, don't we? And
yes.
back to Birmingham,
Yes.
back to the bull ring, and actually explain to people where it was first possibly identified. Obviously, it happened before then, but it was behavioural resistance or bait box avoidance back then, wasn't it? I believe.
No, so the Birmingham bull ring was an amylase deficiency, which led to a carbohydrate resistance or carbohydrate resistant population.
Yeah. And that was all to do with the food stuffs that were being, if I remember.
So my understanding is that type of behavioural resistance, actually, I would class closer to being a physiological resistance that
Yeah.
manifested in a behavioural response. It's my understanding that the mice in the Birmingham bull ring lost the ability to produce the enzyme amylase in their saliva and in their gut, which means they weren't able to break down carbohydrates. So as a result, there wasn't a huge calorific benefit in eating carbohydrates, but there was still a benefit in eating proteins and fats. Now, all of our baits, carbohydrate based.
And the difference between which you touched on then, is the difference between a learnt
Yes.
response and a genetic knowledge passed down, isn't there?
Yeah, hereditary passing down of knowledge and information, or a learnt
Yes.
one. And the learnt one can be also taught at the infant level, but that's
so that's the same as the resistance in second generation or anticoagulants. Resistance is the genetic passed down ability, whereas tolerance to something like alpha chlorulose is a learnt response.
Tolerance to alpha chlorulose is, this is going to sound so nerdy, it is an upticking of the cytochrome enzymes which allow those animals to metabolize alpha chlorulose faster, and so that can happen within a single generation. And it's
it's not passed down, is it? So the behavioral resistance is passed down to the young, to generations below, isn't it? It's not learned. So that's where the difference is, learned and generational.
Yeah, absolutely. So one can happen within the lifetime of an animal, the other one takes subsequent successive generations.
And also the difference is that some don't like the actual food source, but some don't like the actual bait box or the feeling of it.
So this is it. So this is the one that Susan was encountering. And actually, there's a really, Susan, I've got some questions for you about this in a minute. But first, there's a bit of research done, and I believe it was done by Buckle and a couple of others. It might have been Buckle and Mayer and a couple others, even maybe Ollie got involved with this. I think Ollie might have got involved with this. But what they did was they went out to a farm and they put plastic bait boxes down, they put wooden bait boxes down, and then they used sort of like cover and protected as well. And they found overwhelmingly that the natural presentations, inverted commas, so those using wood and those using in covered and protected, were overwhelmingly preferred by rodents compared to the plastic boxes, and that's without even considering a behavioral element to that. So there is already an innate distrust of plastics, but then when you get these animals associating plastics with danger, then you get exactly what Susan had there, which is a total aversion to engage with anything plastic. The second you swap over to using natural fibers, cardboard, that association's gone. And so how quickly, just out of interest, how quickly did you solve that infestation?
I would say genuinely, it probably took a few months, because initially, you go through, analysing what is going on. Why am I not getting taken? I'm seeing mice. Nothing seems to be going right for me, So I even tried changing the bait boxes to another new bait box in case it was just there was old pheromone or something. I just thought brand new box, try a brand new box, because they're curious, they'll go in them, that'll be fine. Wouldn't have any of it, would not go near them whatsoever. Like I say, the second I put the cardboard boxes down, they were in them and they were eating like mad. I was finding dead mice everywhere.
I mean, and that just goes to prove exactly that point. So, Susan, thank you ever so much. I mean,
you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Let you get back the other side there. So, catch you in a sec. So, how did that compare to your experience? Because I kind of stopped you dead on yours. So, what was?
Well, actually, it wasn't our experience. I was in a meeting with a customer, and they said that they were having issues with mice not going in traps. We're one of a couple of pest controllers that they deal with, and I said, well, I think that's probably behavioural resistance then. and they were like, yeah, that's what the other guy said. And I'm like, sounds about right then. So the behavioural resistance then isn't just in bait box. The use of, I've got to say, I'm going to act dumb now for everybody else's benefit. Otherwise, I think on the podcast sometimes that we take it for granted that we actually know everything, and we just carry on as if, you know, we've been doing it so long that everybody doesn't necessarily know the same. So I'm going to act stupid and say, is it the same for a plastic bait box as a plastic trap?
I would say yes. Now, the thing is, a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is going to be based on experience, based on anecdote, and based on sort of like good supposition, based on like observation, because there hasn't genuinely been a huge amount of research done into this. Now, you look at the genetic researches of resistance, and we've had the sort of like the crew-led and also the RAC-led resistance mapping programs across Europe, which have been going on for some time. And before that, we had other researchers looking into these various single nucleotide polymorphisms cropping up all the way back, as far back as the like 60s, when we first discovered resistance in mice to warfarin. Oh, Sean said he can come in. Sean, you don't have to ask us to come onto your own podcast. Come on if you want. So with that, there is a whole body of research about this genetic resistance to the chemicals that we use, but there hasn't been nearly the same amount of scrutiny to behavioral resistance. That being said, there are some fantastic studies out there on the way that rodents behave to stimuli in lab situations and so on and so forth, and how these guys communicate, how they express danger, how they're able to, you know, do all of these things. And so with that, hey, Shawnee boy, we can make some assumptions. I mentioned before, there's a couple of really famous studies which are quite interesting. So one of them, which I mentioned before, about this sort of like hereditary learning as opposed to this innate behavior. So they took a mama rat and they let her have a choice between two foods, a good food and a spoiled food. And of course, initially, she tries a bit of both and then very much latches onto the good food, which we will call feed A. Okay. She then gave birth, and they allowed those rats pups to wean. And as soon as they had fully weaned, they took her away before they'd taken any solid food and put them into another cage where they're presented with food A, food B, and then food C, something completely new, something completely different. And overwhelmingly, they found that every one of those rat pups, the first meal, and in fact, the first several meals that they took, were all from trough A, because that's what mum had been eating. And that's because rat mums are able to express certain chemicals and pheromones in their urine, saliva, and milk to let their offspring know what is safe. So there is an element of sort of like generational learning here, even before that animals become independent. So we see that with like food choices. But also, they're able to communicate distress and the rest of it. So, but absolutely, like I would say that all plastics, not all plastics, but I would say that rodents would consider plastics, or at some chemical within plastics, these plasticizing agents, and they're associated with danger. And so a plastic box is considered to be as dangerous as a plastic trap, as it is probably considered to be, you know, something else. Because for them, they're not avoiding a box; they're avoiding a scent, or they're avoiding something like that.
So how then? So going back again, we've got 1985. We've identified the first behavioural resistant mice in Birmingham. Okay, and I hasten to add that, you know, I'm just asking the layman's questions here. How then do they get from there and that ability, that genetic passed down ability, all the way down to the southern tip, the best side of Britain, down in the southwest, and get up to the top of that lot up there in sort of like
the same way that any the same way that any resistance travels at the end of the day. So, like with the genetics and the Birmingham bull ring, I believe is a a form of genetic resistance, which is we call behavioural, but because it's a behavioural thing that they do. But the classic rule of thumb is most in rats and mice, most resistances, if they're allowed to migrate naturally, and this is by breeding with neighbouring populations of animals, move about 5 miles a year. So for it to suddenly crop up in places like Ali Pali in London less than a decade later, obviously that's not a natural migration, 5 miles a year. What we're probably seeing there is the good old transit, network of Great Britain, moving these animals around in stored goods, moving them around in shipping containers. That's us. It's the same way that if you have a look at the movement of rodents, you have Rattus norvegicus, took something like 30 million years to get from the steppes of Russia down to Southeast Asia, and then took about 300 years to go from Southeast Asia all the way across Europe and across to America, because suddenly we had the Silk Road and it was like a super highway for moving animals from one side to another. So yeah, that's
Sean, you've got to say something.
Oh, it's interesting. We deal with it all the time, like all the time. You go into TS1, in postcode area TS1, TS5. If you're dealing with a mouse problem, then 99% of the time it'll be house noise, and 99% of the time it'll have a behavioural resistance. And the only issue that we sort of find with it is that the current guidelines on dealing with it aren't useful. I can remember when I was a member of the BPCA, they said to me, before you use rodenticides on a mouse problem, you have to trap one and find out it's a house mouse. And I was like, even though I've done 1,000 houses in that postcode, every single one has been a house mouse. I've got to start from scratch and trap another one. And like, do you understand how hard it is to get them onto a trap? Like it was just, so we just ended up sacking that, right or wrong, we just sacked that advice off, and we just deal with every mouse in TS1, TS5, 2, 3, 4, 6, not 7, not 8, 9. In back of the heart.
Just very quickly, because of course we've just had Hugh sitting here being like, behavioural resistance is I'm not going to say it's not a thing, but you've not had a big experience with behavioural resistance, whereas you're saying that you have not yet. But with that, Hugh, I'm right in thinking that you are much more rurally based, and even sort of like the large population hubs around southwest England are nothing realistically compared to Newcastle and surrounding areas, which are very urbanized and very built up. So do you believe that actually a lot of this true behavioural resistance, which is the aversion to plastics or the aversion to certain bait types, is more prevalent in urban areas because there's a greater exposure to those control pressures than there would be in rural environments?
I will say that the one place that I've just suddenly heard that it's happening is a part of a town that is and that part of the town is terraced houses.
Mm-hmm.
It's always terraced houses, low value houses. Where we are anyways, it's always the areas that the immigrants would be in. Nearly always, if the cockroaches turn up there, the resistant house mice are going to turn up there. And I think Alex is absolutely right. It's pressure of killing them, isn't it? It's not rocket science. If you kill something so often, the one that learns not to die through that method very quickly populates it, doesn't it?
And I'm going to throw a spanner in the works there, not a spanner in the works, but I'll say something quite divisive, which is in more built-up urbanized areas, especially areas of low income, the reliance on do-it-yourself pest management is a lot more prevalent. People will give it a go first, and they'll try, they'll go on YouTube and Reddit and all of these other things, and they'll put plastic bottles and cut the heads off them and turn them inside out. And they're going to do a whole host of things that will impact that animal and result in that negative stimulus event. It's not a lethal event, but it's definitely an event that they're going to associate with danger. And so with that, do you believe that that might also be a driving factor, for behavioural resistance, which is this exposure to either partial control or improper control, leaving animals smarter than they were at the beginning of the day?
isn't that the same? Wasn't that the same that we were talking about bed bugs, where where the one that's permethrin resistant survives, it proliferates from there onwards. So is that not the same with mice and rats?
You'd imagine it is. For that to be a case, you have to either assume or believe that rodents are able to communicate complex structures, not just a case of I feel unwell or I am afraid or I am happy, which are basic emotions which you can convey with body language and the rest of it. You have to assume, therefore, that a rodent is able to somehow convey to the rest of the population the thing that smells like that thing over there is dangerous, because otherwise resistance would stop at the individual level. Imagine there's the three of us here and we were all encountering the same situation. Now, I previously encountered this and survived. Now, assumption A is I'm going to be like, I'm not going to do that, but I've no way to communicate with you two, so you're going to blunder in and die. But that's not what we're seeing, because that leaves just one survivor. What we're seeing is whole populations of animals who are surviving. So that means I have some way to turn around and say, Sean, Hugh, box over there, danger, 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 don't touch it. Which means rodents ostensibly have that same capacity to convey this complex message of danger. Otherwise, you'd catch them all, or you'd catch all but a small proportion, and we're not seeing that.
I think it's a lot more simple than that. And this is how I explain it. There's certain people where if they chew cotton wool or tin foil, it sets them off, doesn't it? There's certain things where if it happens, they're like, oh, I can't do that. I can't deal with that. Yeah. And I just think if you get one where instead of a human chewing cotton wool and getting that where it sets the teeth on edge, then if that mouse standing on plastic, it does it to that mouse, then it doesn't take long for a population of 2 or 3 or 4. Say there's a population of 100 mice and 5% of them suffer with this chewing cotton wool thing. You got 5, them 5 who are now almost impervious to being killed if the standard response of every pest controller is to put down plastic boxes and do the same thing. How many boys do you need to have a go at solving a problem who are unaware of that before those 5 mice turn into 100 resistant mice? Because we see what we see when we deal with it is that you'll go in and you'll deal with a population and you can clear out a percentage of them with normal tactics. You just won't clear them all out. So say there's 100 mice in the house, you can go and put plastic boxes in and you'll kill some. You'll absolutely kill some, but you won't kill them all. And the worse the resistance, the higher the population of the ones that won't go in the box, if that makes sense. So as you start to drift out, then you get less of it.
So what you are describing there is that's not a learned resistance. That's I've experienced this before. That is a genetic resistance manifesting in a physiological response, which is, see, I believe that there is an element of both of these things in it. I believe there is, because you can, let's say, we'll see it in mice, especially in rural populations, that will not engage with plastics, but they will never, they will engage with the plastic. And Stuart's mentioned now, he's put some videos up before of rats, and you see them, that behavior, they haven't even touched it, but they will sort of like stand like the classic elephant on a ball, fall all 4 feet at the same, and then sort of like lean their way in to approach to investigate that object. They're not touching it, they're just simply sensing it. Sorry, Hugh, you're desperate to say something.
But is that not the difference between being behaviorally resistant to a trap than a bait box? Because we're always taught that second generations are chronic rodenticides, so they're taking days to kill them. So there's not that thought process that's what killed me. So at what stage did a mouse or a rat work out that stuff in that box killed my buddy, I'm not going to eat it?
But this is it. So this is what Susan said before. It's not the stuff in the box that they're avoiding, not every time. Sometimes absolutely it will be, but other times it's not the stuff in the box that they're avoiding. Because as she said, when she swapped from plastic boxes to cardboard run-through tubes, the uptake was almost instantaneous. So it was definitely an aversion to the plastic rather than the product within the box. Now, we make hundreds of things out of plastic, so it may not be something that pest control is doing to influence this behavior. It could be the fact that they've learned that certain objects are dangerous to be around, and those objects are also made of plastic.
I wonder if when we used to use the cardboard boxes, this might be completely out there, but remember the cardboard boxes? You used to put a little daub of, well, then you put bromide, which was a paste bait, deadline paste or whatever, in the box. Now that box, literally, a mouse didn't have to go in the box. All he had to do was put his head in the entrance, and you would often see the take on the edge of the actual blob, if that makes sense. Whereas now we stick a baffle. We stick a baffle in a plastic box so you can't stick your finger around it and touch it. I wonder if, you know, is it the fact that that mouse years ago when we were using cardboard boxes didn't even have to enter the box to feed? Because you would always get a take on the outer edge, not on the inner edge of the box.
And there's been a couple of other bait boxes that have come out that have utilized that same thought process. So if anyone remembers the Project Neo boxes that came out from Pelsis ages ago, they were missing half of the box was missing the floor. So that animal didn't take that jarring transition of ground to plastic before it was actually fully in the box. And then at that point, and so that's...
Are they still a thing? Do they still sell those? Did anybody on watching use those? What did they think of them?
I use them. I have a lot on the farm. Okay, admittedly, they were left over from trials I did on them, but they were so good in the trials, I took all the boxes that I had and continued to use them.
Charlie, the other thing that we're missing out on, though, this behavioural change that we see in the mice, it doesn't just manifest itself in what they eat. It manifests itself in how they eat, and it manifests in their behaviour as well. So one of the things that when you talk about underestimation of the size of the problem, you know, you thought that mice run around shitting every however often, 80 times a day or 160, whatever it is, and you'll find loads of mouse poo. Behavioural resistant mice that we've seen absolutely are far more rat-like in their toilet behaviour. And if you look hard enough, often it's hidden in wall cavities and stuff. You'll find a toilet behaviour, and you'll find huge in the terraced houses, you'll find huge areas of smear marks with very little drop-ins. And to the inexperienced person, they'll walk in, they'll see the little bits of drop-ins, and they'll think, "Oh, there's only a couple here." You've got to really look, and then you realise that the problem. So they change their day-to-day behaviour, how they go to the toilet. It's almost like
Latrine.
Executed. It's like the way I describe it to the lads is, it's like dealing with the most neophobic rat you've ever met in your life. And if you deal with it like that, you'll kill it. But also, we've noticed, and it would be very easy to turn around and say, these don't like carbohydrates. If you put a pile of wheat that's too big, they will not touch it under any circumstances. If you split that pile of wheat up into 5 and 10 grains, put your hand in underneath the kickboards and put at the back of the kickboards. Just put 5 grains, 5 grains, 5 grains, 5 grains, like literally count them out. Within 24 hours, they'll smash them. It's like they're like feeding on crumbs. And as soon as you give them a big amount, they're like, danger, not touching it, danger, not touching it. You know, yeah.
I would say that's the whole thought process between, and this is for years and years, why, especially for mice, you know, mouse baiting points, you look at the labels of rodenticides, the baiting points are very small, but the intervals between them are also much smaller, because it's well established, and this is, you know, research done all the way back from the Rentokil library days, that mice are sporadic feeders. They like to feed from a little bit from lots of places. It's part of this foraging behavior they have, six-ish grams, 3 to 6 grams per feed. Mice will have 50 plus in some instances feeding events between 0.1 and 0.2 of a gram. They'll basically just graze everywhere that they go. So yeah, one big discrete point doesn't really like feed into their behavior, whereas lots of little points absolutely feeds into their grazing behavior.
But that's exactly what the way that, you know, you imagine. So we've gone from like doing it properly to, oh my God, this pest controller's slinging his bait down everywhere. Why hasn't he put 10 grams in a tray? Why has he just got it and gone, poochoom?
Because there has to be a balance between, tactically yeeting bait across someone's house to.
Well, yeah, but if you're under, look, I'm not advocating this, okay, but we're going back to a different post in a different time where people are like, oh, look at what they're doing, and judging other people without knowing the exact reasons why. If it's under a kickboard, okay, and it's safe, what is the difference between putting it in a tray and sprinkling it along, as long as you clean it up afterwards? Where's the difference? Because somebody will go in and go, oh, look at what they've done. Look at that. That's disgusting. Let's take a photo and put it all over Facebook. This is disgusting.
In my mind, it's all about risk management. And that's it. If you can show that you can adequately control the risks of your placement, this comes back to covered and protected, doesn't it? At what point does covered and protected bait placements become dangerous and irresponsible? Because you could argue that a really great way of doing covered and protected is, going back years, putting it inside a drain pipe and putting it inside that barn store. It's covered, it's protected, animals can't get their hands in. And yet, you sit there and you look at it nowadays and you say, well, actually, you can lift that drain pipe up, it all slips at the end, you have all these issues. So it needs to be a balance between, it's reasonably practicable, isn't it? What is technically effective balanced by what has an undue risk to non-target animals. And this is why everyone's sort of like, they've lent too far on this side, and the safest, inverted commas, or the route.
Rupert just said something there, and this is exactly how I teach my lads. And I'll say to them, you've got to remember when you're dealing with scruffy pest control and you run the risk of someone coming in and saying you're doing a shit job, you've just got to be confident that you're doing the right thing. Because the risk is to the customers of them picking up a disease, in it. But it's absolutely right. I say to the lads, if you wanted to kill behavioural resistant mice, I froze.
You froze.
I was just saying, but I was saying to the lads, we call it scruffy pest control. That's what it is. If anyone looked at it, you'd think it was scruffy. However, I'll say to them, and Rupert's point's exactly right. I say, if you wanted to deal with a behavioural resistant mouse problem, and this came from, remember the technical guy, Mark, who was at Kilgym? Mark.
Avery?
Used to do the exams and everything. What was he called?
Is it Mark Avery?
No.
No.
Retired. It'll come to us anyways. And he said to us, and it's true, if you want to deal with them, the fastest way and probably the best way, steady, I know. He said, take a handful of grain and you would literally throw it off the wall and just let it explode. Shut the door, walk out and come back in a week.
But we were told that like 35 years ago. If in an ideal situation, not saying we've got to do it, but in an ideal situation with dealing with mice, what you would do is stick your hand in a bucket of bait and just cast it. We sow the fields and scatter. I'm not advocating it, but that's what we were told. If you could do it, that's the way that you would do it.
True. But as I said before, there is a gaping chasm between. Let's just, to take this away from pest control for a second and to use an analogy. I want to change the light bulb in this room right now, and all I've got to stand on is just a really useful box that's sat in the corner of the room. Now that's the quickest, the easiest way to do it. Arguably, it's not the safest way to do it because the chances of me toppling off that box very high. So what I should do is I should go downstairs and get the step ladder. It's downstairs, it's a bit more difficult. I bring it up. You could argue it's a faff, I have to go buy a step ladder. It's about balancing risk versus reward.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree that a rodent's natural predisposition is to eat food that is foraged from the floor. That has had a lot of research. You know, rodents will prefer to forage over than to be gifted food. So one study that I'll give you, they took some rodents, they gave, and this is, they gave it like 3 bowls of food. So sunflower seeds, what was it, like millet, and then just whole wheat. And when they were all sort of like individual, they ate for a little bit from each one, but they overwhelmingly chose the sunflower seeds because the sunflower seeds had the better sort of like calorific profile. Now they redid the experiment, A, B, and C, sunflower, millet, grain, and then they put a 4th one in there, which had them all mixed together. Now you'd think they'd still go for the sunflower seeds because it's easier. But overwhelmingly, these rats went for the one that was mixed together because it elicited this foraging response. They still picked all the sunflower seeds out, but they preferred to forage for the sunflower seeds through the mix of the others.
There was a bait like that, wasn't there? Whatever happened to that?
Rhodolon trio. And I still think it exists, actually. But that is based exclusively on that foraging behavior.
Yeah, it had little cut wheat, whole wheat, and also the little compressed pellets in it, doesn't it? Didn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that for a while. I thought it was used for actually gold or something.
Oh, there's trio. I believe BSF does. BSF does have a patent on what it calls Fortec technology, which is foraging technology, and it goes into a lot of their products. But that's a conversation for another day. But the point is rodents will prefer to forage, and so as you say, yeah, if you were to throw a handful of grain on the floor and then put a pot of grain in the corner of the room, they would probably forage it up well before they went for the pot of grain. But the point is, you know, we could argue that we're getting to semantics. We're not talking about behavioural resistance anymore.
Yeah, well, no, we are. No, we are. So how do we? This is going to sound, because I'm playing that. Right. How do we know we've got behavioural resistance then? Because the buggers won't die.
This is kind of what I was saying at the very beginning, wasn't it? Which is you probably have experienced behavioural resistance, but don't know it. So in my mind, the best way to define behavioural resistance is simply an animal that is doing something that deviates from its normal expected patterns of behaviour. Now, the thing is if your methods of control already circumvent that behavioural resistance, like I prefer to use wooden snap traps over plastic snap traps, then you're never going, you'll control behavior resistant mice without ever necessarily realizing that you had a behavior resistant mouse in the first place. If you prefer to use covered and protected bait placements over using tamper resistant bait stations, then you'll never actually experience behavior resistance, despite the fact that you will have controlled umpteen number of behavior resistant animals. So again, it depends, and this is why we have so many. There's no one correct way of doing pest management. There are definitely wrong ways of doing it, but because we have this sort of like absolute plethora of tactics that we deploy to control rodents, a lot of people may not experience the same behavioral resistances that their competition 5 miles down the road are experiencing, simply because they have a different methodology behind them.
So what are we saying to people then? What's the first step that they should take? So if they think that they have let's talk about mice, just because that's what it, if you think you've got a behavioural problem with mice, what's the first thing that people should consider?
Look at what you're doing and assume that something within your program is causing this deviation in behavior. And so let's say you're using plastic traps and they're not going onto plastic traps. Change just one thing. Don't change everything, just change one thing. Using plastic traps, switch over to using wooden traps. If you're using plastic bait stations, move over to using wooden or natural, like cover and protected. If you are using cover and protected and they're not eating it, but you're using wax blocks with a cherry blossom flavor to them, assume that they might be it's the wax of the block. So move over to a grain with a I'm trying not to use actual terms that we have there, so we're not giving favoritism, but aniseed or caramel or something like that. Change that one thing. Sean, how do you get over the resistance when you identify it?
That easy. So we've done enough now that we know where we're going to get it. But if someone said to me, I don't know if we've got it, I'd say it's fucking super simple. Just put some tracking dust down around the outside of your boxes and see what happens. And they'll show you straight away. If they're there and they're not going in, then as a general rule, if they won't, what we found, if they won't go into a plastic box, you'll be dealing with behavioural resistance, because mice are pretty inquisitive, aren't they, if they're not that way inclined. Think about where you are. The closer to the city centre, the more inclination you've got to have that, you know.
So hence the cartoons with the little ladders over the boxes.
Yeah. So it's really interesting you mentioned that, because recently I was involved with putting a rebuttal into ECHA. I had to write a technically reasoned piece for ECHA. Not going to get into the details of it, but it was around behavioural resistance. And I asked a load of pest controllers, asked a load of different people, can you send me videos of what you believe? And a lot of people sent in behavioural resistance, photos of that. But a lot of those photos were exactly as Sean said, whether people had put down tracking dust or even sort of like in some cases flour or talc. And you could clearly see footprints going towards the box, and then literally like they'd hit a force field, just pinging off and disappearing off on another trajectory. And it wasn't just one or two photos, it was quite a substantial number. And even videos that people were sending in where rodents were moving on, and it literally like someone had flicked them on the nose, moving back and then disappearing off. And the thing is you would never be aware of that if you weren't able to monitor and sort of like remote view those instances. You just assume that you hadn't put your traps in the right place, you hadn't put your boxes in the right place.
Another reason why cameras are better than plastic boxes.
Pardon?
Another reason why cameras are better than boxes for remote monitoring.
Oh, absolutely. And you've got to argue as well, sort of like you could I'm not going to get into that, but we've only got half an hour left. And
we've only got half an hour.
The other thing as well is have a very good look at what the off origin on it was alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
But if you find that they are walloping protein-based things, so that the type of things that we can use to get them is, if you've had a sandwich, say you go and get yourself a chicken mayonnaise sandwich, and you know the paper that it like comes in when you buy from a chicken, you get the bag and then you get the paper wrap. If that's got like traces, and you can't, I know it sounds weird, if you try to replicate that, it's almost like the no. So if you rub mayonnaise on paper and chuck it down, it's like the no. They almost know what rubbish is. So if you can get anything like that and pull that paper out and look at it, you'll find that that's the type of stuff that they're walloping.
But
like,
do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think also, like Darren has said there, that a lot of pest controllers immediately, doesn't actually said that, but we always think, immediately, oh, let's change the bait, let's change the bait. But there are other things than baits. There are contact gels, there are contact foams that you can use. And that goes back to that old rent-a-kill adage, not using every available tool that's in your box and taking it to the infestation, not allowing the infestation to come to the product.
Yeah. And as I say, that's exactly what I was trying to get to before I derailed myself, which is behavioral resistance is an abnormal behavior. As soon as you understand what makes that animal a superhero, what's making it a super mutant, and you take that away from it and you don't play into that game anymore. I don't like plastic. Okay, let's not use plastic. I don't like eating things. Okay, let's present you with something that doesn't require you to consume it. Contact gels. Okay. Everybody's a bad example, but it's a good example.
Probably the other thing that we do, which we have cracking success with, is take one single sachet of pasta, take some of the bird wire, the really fine plastic coated wire, just tie one sachet onto a bit of wire and tie one to each of the upstands on the back of the kitchen units. You get them little black plastic legs. Mm-hmm. Do one per plastic leg, So you're going to go a little bit and put them along the back wall. And then I always think if anyone comes in and goes, that's scruffy, it's actually tied to the back wall. So you could say, mate, it's better than putting it in a plastic tray. It can't get dragged around. If you want to go belt and braces, you can take one of your little stickers, fill your sticker in, fold it over on your wire, then tie it in. So then it really doesn't look scruffy. So it's that scruffy pest control that you can present in a far better, more professional way. And then, Al, where's the money?
I was about to say, money's in the paperwork. I was literally about to say, it's all about how you communicate that strategy to your client. If you just kind of click under there and say, I'm going to be back in a week, that's one thing. If you turn around and say, look, behavioral resistant mice, I'm using a covered and protected bait station. It is still secure. I am assuming that the kickstand that is here is the bait box to all intents and purposes. I'm going to put this on. You are not to remove it. It's a tamper-resistant environment, which I have secured my bait behind. Arguably, what is the difference between that and using a lockable bait station? If so long as you can prove that that placement is as secure, if not more secure, than using a commercial tamper-resistant bait.
This is the other thing that you start teaching your lads as well, because you say this is where you've got to control the customer. So if you want to, and I'll do this more than comfortably, you can work out where your kickboard is. You can put a little drill down and bang a screw down into it, and they go, oh, the customer wouldn't like that. And I go, all right, I just tell them they're going to live with mice. Here's your solution. Like, I don't want to screw in there. Well, literally, I'm not going to put any bait behind it then, because you've got a little dog, and I don't want your dog to die. It is only a screw. If you don't want that, that's absolutely fine. But you have to understand that this treatment's going to go on, and this is the reason why I'm doing it. And they go, and then all of a sudden they go from, I don't really want to screw in there to, well, let's solve it. It's going to solve. All right, okay, let's do that then.
Yeah, you know? And of course your screw there turns that kickboard from a liability, because anyone can pull up, to actually that is now to all intents and purposes, it's a tamper resistant. It's not a tamper proof. Anyone can take a screwdriver to it, but someone has to do that with malice and intent to then get behind that kickboard. Now this is an interesting one, because I don't believe this is necessarily, this goes back to my comment about neophobia being a form of transitional resistance. It's a behavior that manifests in a difference from what you can do. But I solidly believe that pre-baiting, especially if you use the right monitors, is a fantastic tool for getting rodents engaged in a way that is lower risk, because you can use monitors in a much greater variety of situations as the risks are lower. Hugh, you don't agree with this?
Problem with that, isn't there, really? Okay, Joe Bloggs phones up and says, we got mice. Oh, you got mice, mate? Okay, then. It's a 3-part treatment. It's going to cost you X, Y, Z. But, oh, by the way, actually, that 3-part treatment isn't 3 parts. It's 6 parts, because we got to spend 3 of them pre-baiting. It's not going to...
okay, but for domestics, not going to work.
Not even domestics. But you've got to remember, it's not just domestic properties. And then you're going to have your Tesco's, you're going to have your corner shops, you're going to have all them. So there is definitely a thing where you've got it cleared. In a terraced house, you know they're going to come back. And this is when we do use monitoring blocks, and we're not using it to monitor that problem at all. We are not using it to monitor that problem. We're using it to create a habit. That mouse runs there, it eats that, and it runs off. And we've got one at the minute where me and Ellis are dealing with it, and he's struggled to get his head around it. I'm saying to him, like, you're not feeding them, you're creating a habit. That's what you're doing. So if you're clear of mice,
but that's a reverse situation, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's still technically pre-baiting, because you're catching.
You're reversing it, aren't you? What you're saying, Sean, is you've cleared the problem, then you're putting non-tox down for the next time. So you're actually reversing the situation in a way.
Because we find, and I'll guarantee you this, I'll guarantee you 100%, right? You go in, you clean a job up, it's absolutely clean, you put poison down, it's almost like the fucking no, and you come back and that poison's no good anymore. That's the problem that we've had with this particular job, and you've got to take it out, because you've got to create that habit. You've got to create that habit. I run here, I eat this. And the job that we're dealing with at the minute, there's that much of a food source around. Anybody would say to you, like, you're not going to get them to eat it. You will get them to eat it if it's non-toxic. And I don't know why, but they just do. It's like, and you create that habit, and then this is when you get good. Rat Pack do a metal box.
Yeah.
Absolutely mint. They're about £8. I promise you, we've been through loads of them, and they are absolutely phenomenal. Especially if you're dealing with these home addresses where people don't, where you know, there's a massive language barrier, and you can't say to them, "Don't let the kids go in the cupboard under the stairs," and "Don't let the kids go here." And don't. Their metal boxes are absolutely phenomenal for dealing with this.
What are we? We're talking pre-baiting now. So, what are we gonna use for a pre-bait then? Do we think?
Talon track. Still,
I would argue
you're going paste or block.
Doesn't make a difference.
I would argue the pre-monitor, okay, regardless of what your preferences are, should match as closely as possible what you intend to use.
Hasn't it?
Yeah. So if you like using wax blocks, your pre-bait needs to be a wax block. If you like using pastes, your pre-bait needs to use a paste which is the same formulation, because otherwise you're offering them an apple and then expecting them to eat an orange after.
Yeah, I promise you, we had it where we're putting Talon track down and then alpha chlorulose and slotting them. Then you're putting pre-Lontra down and then hitting them with Cilantro and you're slotting them. If you put Talon track down and jump the Cilantro, they wouldn't touch it. You have to get that habit where they are running in. It looks the same, it tastes the same, it is the same to the best of their ability, and then you'll get them to move over. But you will definitely find that you have to have a number of different options in your armory when you deal with them, when it is a constant and repetitive problem that's coming their way.
And I think again, for people watching, that's one thing, and that we've got to remember that harborage treatment is, it's still going back to that. Where are they now? If you can. All the time, where are they now? Take that product. Do you think, Alex, that it's important you get that, if it's a bait, that you get that bait close to where they're living? Or do you think it's more important to put it where they're actually feeding?
So there's an age-old expression, isn't it, which is take the poison to the pest. Because you want there to be as little resistance to moving to that bait as possible. So it's why things like burrow baiting is so phenomenally effective, because there is no, that animal doesn't have to go and explore, it doesn't have to put itself in danger, it doesn't have to leave its house, it's got a Deliveroo right there. Arguably, it needs, whatever you do needs to factor into that animal's normal behavior patterns. You can't expect them to go and start doing something really weird, like taking a huge deviation away from their known and trusted runs in order to engage with something completely novel, because they'll never know it's there. So bring the poison to the pest. But
the only thing I would say on that is that's absolutely correct. The pest. However, don't think that putting there's a hole coming out of a wall and you put a box facing the wall. You can't go box. They won't know. You see it, don't you? Where there's a rat coming through a hole, and people have got 3 snapback traps facing the hole. It's got to come out. It's got to come out. You're like, that's not going to work. They can sense that a mile off. So there is that thing, but please don't be stacking stuff at holes, thinking that that's the solution to your problem. You are literally going to make things a lot worse.
So I'm going to be. Go on. What about sticking venom paste in the hole that they're coming through then? Yeah.
I would say that there's ways of doing that. So again, with my sensible hat on here, venom paste will, like a mote of it, it theoretically will work at that point, because that's taking the poison to the pest. But remember, your label does say that at the end of the treatment, you should, wherever possible, be able to retrieve and dispose of any used bait.
If I'm linking it up,
Pardon?
I find licking it up after quite good.
Yeah, okay. It depends on how much you put in there. Now, arguably, you could put it on a bit of duct tape and then sort of like put that into the hole, and then you can remove the bit of duct tape afterwards. We're getting back to behavior resistance, which is all they engage with that. All I'm saying is, from a technical point of view of this podcast, if you are going to squirt pesticides and use them in people's properties, you have to be able to, wherever possible, be retrieving them. Or if you can't retrieve them, you need to be able to show that nobody can have easy access to that. If they have to knock down a wall
This
to get
brings up
to
another
that point.
point. Sorry, this brings up another point. We definitely find 1,000,000% that if you can get the bee into an area where they know you cannot get, they are more, they'll accept it a lot more readily. So again, if you take a pasta sachet, tie it on fine wire, push it into that hole, and just stay with that screw into the floorboards and push the carpet back over, so people don't know it's there, they can't get to it. I'll almost guarantee you that they'll rinse the whole of that sachet on its own than the wool if you put it somewhere else that was more accessible. But
That's
please don't go and put 4 sachets on and bang 4 sachets down thinking that's going to work, because you'll just end up not being able to get them out. They won't eat it because there's too much. You've got to do that little enough.
We used to put contact dust in like a tissue paper. Contact dust tissue paper, and then make a little wrap of it and then stuff it in the hole so that they would chew through the paper and then get covered in the contact dust. So I wonder if you could do the same of that with venom paste. Don't take it. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying, I'm just wondering whether you could do that with paste. Stick it in the hole, and then of course you can pull it out afterwards.
Tell you what we've done, and I've never shown. In fact, I'll find the boxes. I'll bring some of the boxes next time. I'll show you what we created. Some, like, we call them sandwich boards. They're about that sort of deep. It's just plywood top, plywood bottom, and then the sides are like 1-inch square wood. And we've made just a big, long, thin box, if that makes sense. And it's about 12 inches by 12 inches square. And all we do with that is we take the paper that they love out of your sandwich wrappers, or the rubbish, and so on, put it in the middle, and then we'll put contact gel inside it. And they'll enter that. You can see them going in. And when you come, they'll absolutely smash the living daylight out of the paper, and they'll wallop themselves on the contact gel. And you can get away with putting that in, like, airing cupboards, boiler cupboards, things like that. Put your sticker on it, and the dentist, I do not touch, everything screwed down, and they do wallop that, like, and that's probably the safest thing that we've done for it, especially if it's them shitty houses where you go in the airing cupboard or the boiler cupboard, and it's a wooden. They haven't put the carpet in, and it's wooden, and there's cracks in the carpet, and they're coming up through there. You bang it in there, and you'll slaughter them, and they're doing that.
So, I mean, this is interesting. It's actually, we've gone full circle getting to the end of the podcast here, which is, rather than behavioral resistance being a barrier to success, we're flipping this on its head, which is the more you understand about that animal's behavior, the better your success is going to be. Even animals that are behaviorally resistant, so long as you know and understand what that behavior is, an aversion to plastic, an aversion to open spaces, an aversion to carbohydrate, so long as you know that behavior, you can actually then better control that than you probably would do just a standard population, because you can work to their needs.
Does that sort of here's a question: do you believe that behavioral resistance has come about because of lazy pest control?
No.
I believe that there is an element of both with this, honestly. I believe incomplete treatments, whether or not you consider that to be lazy or not, leaves animals which are more successful at survival. And
in other words, are we just banging bait boxes rather than going back to where are they now and treating them at Harbridge?
Oh, in which case, yes. People fire and forget pest control strategies will only kill the dumb and the weak, and they will leave the strong and the smart to survive. So if you're not doing your proper checks, if you're not looking for ingress points, if you're not looking for the animal moving around the site, then not only are you going to just be wheedling out the old infirm and the generally not smart animals, you're going to be rewarding the smart ones for avoiding it. So yes, I mean, lazy is maybe not the right word, but maybe it is. Maybe
Thanks, Sean.
I totally disagree. I totally disagree. I think Darwin said, what was it? It's the biggest and strongest that survive, but it is the first to adapt. And I think my gut feeling of dealing with these is that these are genetic mutations that occurred and have been able to proliferate. And I don't think the pest control could have done anything about them. If I wanted to point the blame at anybody, which is a bit shit, I'd probably point it at the chemical manufacturers, not. I don't think it's necessarily their fault, but how bear with us on this. I think if you're going to get some sort of resistance to it, in the early days, we used to have like alpha, didn't we, and mix it up yourself and things like that. And they give it to pest controllers and go, you've got to put 3 drops per whatever. Please don't put any more in. You know what I mean? Like, and they're like, right, okay, then let's put 4 or 5 and give them the good stuff. And I think that's probably paid a lot of it. Yeah, I think genetic thing. I think it's genetic.
I think, as I said at the beginning, behavior resistance is a catch-all umbrella term for a lot of different things. And yes, absolutely, there is a genetic element in there. We know that from the Birmingham bull rings with this amylase. Undoubtedly, there is going to be a psychological element which is epigenetically driven by hormones. We know that's why we will have emotions, for crying out loud. There is an element of learned behavior. There's an element of observation that also plays into this as well. And okay, you could argue that the regulations that we've had foisted upon us and the reduction in our toolkit has not helped in certain elements. But I'd argue that as soon as you understand what those elements are, so long as you are able to view them and understand it, we have enough tools still at our disposal to overcome those particular hurdles. And so, yeah, in some instances, there may be nothing we can do about it. But in the vast majority, I think we as pest managers, if we observe the situation thoroughly enough, we'll be able to understand that and they'll be able to control it. As you said there, Sean, you've had several different elements of what you would consider behavioral resistance. Have you failed to control them because you've not had the right tools? No, you simply have just used alternative strategies because you understood the behavior of that animal. But if you come in, put boxes down and left, then you would never have controlled it.
Well, he has something which is interesting. I tell you now, the real reason why we in the early days didn't control problems properly was because we were unaware we were not controlling them properly because we hadn't had the training. I can remember, and this is embarrassing, I went on my level 2 course and Mark, what was his name? It killed him. He was a technical guy. He's going to come with us. I wanted to come on the podcast, but he wouldn't because he's retired. He was talking about it. What?
Wiseman?
No.
No, not Mark Wiseman.
Company. No. Anyway, and he told us about it, and I said, "Oh well, we never get that." And he went, "Sure, you do. You get it loads in Middlesbrough." He said, "I know you do." And I went back and I realised because what happens, what I promise you, or what happened with me was I'd go there, I'd put my plastic boxes down, they'd be down for like a 3-week period, get a little bit of take in one, then the take would stop, and there was very little mouse droppings. I would attribute the smear marks to an ongoing problem that had been numerous times. So I'd think, listen, there's only 1 or 2 mice here, I've got it solved. I'd pick up the boxes, I'd wander off, I'd be absolutely golden, and they probably just wouldn't know again because I hadn't dealt with it. And once he explained to us, and he said, this is what's happening, and I walked in, and it was like, it was exactly the same feeling I had when Paul Stanford said to us, that rat in the rooftop, it's probably drains, you know. And I went, shut up, what you're on about, drains? And he went, it's probably drains, you know. And I lifted up the manhole cover for like the 2nd time and went, fuck. That was exactly the same thing I had when I went back after Mark had told us about it, and I realised how many mouse jobs we'd got wrong, and then it gets your brain ticking, and you're like, right, got you. So I think there's lots of people getting these wrong without even knowing they're getting them wrong. It's not like they wander off and they go, haven't dealt with that. They walk off thinking, solve that problem, and they fucking haven't.
Mark Ward, I knew that.
No, it's not. Mark Ward is the technical guy.
Oh, okay.
Can't help.
So he's not technical. He's the one who deals with product development. He was actually one of their technical officers.
I think you've just got the name horribly wrong now. I'm running out of marks, so apologies, Mark, if you're listening to this. I
Stay
mean,
there. I'm going to go.
You haven't got.
okay.
Right, Sean's going to go because he's going to do something.
I'm checking emails. I wonder if I've got one off him.
Okay, right. We're just going to take you off air while you do that for a second.
Right, so we've got to stick to what we said. So anybody got any last questions? Oh, sorry, Alex.
I was about to say, this is going quite well. Do you want to continue this on for a bit, or do we wait for Luciano to sort of like have his prodigy and bring him back on again? How are we going to run this one?
Should we do it again?
God, right, what do you reckon? I mean, unless very quickly.
Which is yes.
That was very quick, and also I do believe Sean's
internet
actually worse than mine. Yeah, you need to get Starlink. That's what we're all running off.
Are you on Starlink, Alex? No, there.
I mean, not here, but down at the cans, I'm all Starlink. It's absolutely amazing.
Starlink here, and it's 100. I did a speed test just now, and it's 160 upload.
Oh. There we go. There we go. Let's carry on. Let's just do another 2 minutes. I want to ask you some questions now, which is, so from what we've discussed today, how would and you were to sort of like find your technicians having a problem with behavior resistance, how would you then sort of like now coach your staff teams through what to do? From my perspective and Sean's perspective, how would you then take this forwards?
So in most domestic situations, as a company now, we tend not to use rodenticide anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We would normally, for any mouse issue in a house, we would be using traps.
Okay.
And that's that's standard now. We use the Rat Pack Duo mouse boxes.
I think the big question here is, going forwards, how do we as an industry better identify behavior resistance? Because as Sean pointed out there, if you let's just say I put a box down and go into someone's house, I've got mice in the kitchen, I put a load of boxes down, there is some take, we find a dead body, things go a bit quiet.
Because we don't use bait, we wouldn't have a take. We'd just be like, well, customers still, I'm being quite simplistic here. Customers still seeing mice. We've got 10, 20 boxes down. That 20 boxes would be 40 traps, and we're still not getting it. Now, the first thing that we might think around here is it a vole problem? Is it voles? Because they're just not they're going in the boxes, but they're not setting the traps off, which is something that we've had quite a bit, or we've had often. So we would think that first, but then if we're finding evidence of mice, then we might start now, in certain circumstances and places, start thinking, oh yeah, it could be behavioural resistance. So we might swap over to wooden traps, probably. And maybe with the customers say so, we might start using contact rodenticide. We'd use, we may.
I was about to say, would you ever consider for a second that, in that first tranche, putting down tracking dust or tracking gel, or putting down a remote viewing camera, just so you had those eyes on? Or is that too much I was about to say.
Not really, not what, for mice? So if we were on a 3-part treatment and we got to the second treatment and we're still seeing mice, or the client's still seeing mice everywhere, then that may be a consideration.
Okay. So you would use monitoring, so sort of like tracking monitoring, as opposed to
we'd probably whack a camera in there, see what was really going on.
Okay. This is what I was saying before. This is how pest control, or should I say pest management, is evolving, because it's more and you just said it there, we don't like to admit it, but it is becoming more data driven. And that data doesn't necessarily have to be a science, but it is observationally based.
Yeah, data and data. Yeah, there's Sean's got his thumb up.
Don't know, it is.
Okay.
I'll find out. Yeah. I think what will probably happen is, and it, you just deal with it, and you get your ass kicked a couple of times, and then all of a sudden, you know, you realise you've got to, and you'll go into areas. We know before we go to areas what areas we're going to get it. And it was quite funny. I can remember Dale when he first came to us. I'd showed him how to deal with it. He went and done his level 2. He come back, and he was like, "I'm going to do." I was like, "You waste your time, son." He's like, "I'm going to do it properly." After about 4 jobs, he was like, "Can't do this, can you?" I was like, "You can if you want to spend 37 visits dealing with a mouse job, or you can just get rid of it for the customer. It's up to you." But that's it. And my lads are tuned into it now. I just know we deal with every house mouse job in particular areas, like they have behavioural resistance.
So here's a question. From Darren. Would you argue that clean monitoring points over dirty monitoring points help in shyness? So let's talk about rats first, shall we? Quickly.
Brand new boxes are the biggest deterrent to rodents engaging with them ever. I've always maintained that you need to camouflage your box with smell. So if you leave that box open, and if you can condition them to get rid of that plasticky smell, then you have a lot more success with rodents getting in them. That being said, if that box has been, if you've caught a dozen rats in that box and you have never cleaned it out and the inside is just swimming in rat soup, I would argue that may have a negative impact on future rodents moving into that, because who on earth would want to walk into a shoebox that smells of dead bodies?
Sean must have bet Sean's wiped a dead rat around a box before.
No, I haven't. No, but I think I do agree, and this is the other station shamers, isn't it? Like, you can, if you clean your boxes, if you clean your boxes immaculately every time, I think you're being detrimental. I tell you, the one thing that we've found definitely does put them off, although it's anecdotal. If you're catching them in fen traps or dock traps, etc., if you whack them in the bleed on the trap, they don't like going in then. You've got to wait, and you can tell, like, that trap might be catching regular. You'll hit it funny, there'll be a load of blood on the trap, and you'll be like, that's not going to work for a few weeks till that smell of blood is gone. And maybe that's anecdotal, but it's happened that many times where I'm like, but that doesn't catch for the next 3 weeks, and it doesn't. And then you'll be like, you probably start catching now, and then it starts again. So it's like, saying what's going to happen, but we definitely think they're dock traps. When that bait hits them, it blasts the brains all over it. They're not keen on anything there again. It's like they know that its stomach's been walloped.
Not had a problem with that, to be honest, with fens. But
blood.
No.
Yeah.
We never.
Shall I give you my last scientific experiment from my repertoires? This is not my experiment, but this is an experiment that shows that rats can talk to each other through scents. So there was this study done by a guy called Garcia, and he was what we would argue in clinical terms to be a psychopath. And what he did is he took a cage of rats, and he took a cage of rats, and he took one rat out of the cage of rats, and he put a dollop of sucralose on its tongue, just a sweetener, artificial sweetener. Then he took that rat, fresh with its dollop of sucralose, and it chucked it in a microwave. And he wasn't trying to make a sweet, meaty treat. Basically, he gave it a short, sharp dose of radiation, which bloody hurt, but didn't kill that animal. And of course, because rats are unable to understand the intricacies of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Here's a minute.
Just there we go. Yeah, exactly that. Just what a Ronald in there. But basically, it then associated the taste of sucralose with a blinding pain. It was then put back into the cage and allowed to socialize with its cage mates, to which point its cage mates came up to it and this shaking, like, "You don't know where I've been, man. You don't know where I've been." They then picked up another rat at random, A couple of days later, not the first rat, but another rat, they picked it up and they put a dollop of sucralose on its tongue. Before it had even got to the microwave, this rat was freaking out, showing high levels of anxiety, trying to get away, because as far as it was concerned, this sucralose, this was the thing that was about to cause pain, because the other rat...
dickhead, yeah. Well, you sure it wasn't because it was watching it go towards the microwave and see his pal get walloped? Do you know what I mean?
The point being, though, whether it's watching it like, oh god, no, is number one, Garcia.
Not the box, not the box. Definitely the thing on its tongue. Not the box with the.
Not the.
Takes the cream and it rubs it on it.
Not the property being in the corner, yeah, Buffalo Bill. But it shows that rodents have the capacity to communicate, and not only are they able to communicate, they can communicate distress and associate that communicative distress with an object. So the argument here is theoretically that rat, which had the sucralose inside, didn't necessarily need to be alive to convey that message across, did it? If that rat had been put in dead, then the other rats would have come up to it and been like, my God, when he left, he was fine. He comes back smelling of sucralose, and now he is, the light of his life has been covered in shite.
Billy, when you hold somebody's throat hard enough, that Billy says, how did they get it on its tongue? I said, if you strangle somebody, their tongue...
How would you know that? I'm sure Garcia had a way of doing it, which was...
Back on that one.
Interesting, yeah. This is taking a turn. Right. We've given you a little bit extra, guys. I think we will call it a night. We're going to get someone back on in a couple of weeks' time to give us another conversation around behavioural resistance, because it's such a broad and varied topic. But I hope that you all enjoyed tonight. It was a bit educational, and in the comments, just mention over the next couple of days, just keep the conversation going, just tell us what you think you've experienced there. And because I never get to do this to you, Hugh, I'm going to give you the famous 3 questions at the end. So Hugh, have you enjoyed your time on the podcast?
Always.
Go on, give us a shameless plug. Like, who have you got next week?
Next week, I believe we've got Kieran Casper.
Ooh.
We also have coming up, we have Sarah Miles shooting coming up, which should be a really good one. We have Nigel Cheesewright, the crew chairman, coming up as well.
Very good fun.
So off the top of my head, I can't remember the others, which is really bad, but I can't because I had to shuffle quite a few around, and it all got it all scrambled my brain for a short while. We've actually got somebody from Australia coming up, an Australian person coming up, which should be really interesting, who's asked if they can come on. So that's another one. I can't remember anymore.
They're going to be joining us in the middle of the night. And go on, the last one. Who would you like to see? So we've had loads of folks on at the moment, but who have you been trying to get hold of that just hasn't been returning your calls, Hugh? Let's apply a little bit of collective peer pressure on this one.
So I tried to get somebody from Rent-A-Kill on, and that wasn't going to happen. They did actually ask, which in all honesty, I had a reply. There have been a lot of people that haven't even bothered to reply. Rent-A-Kill did phone me up and talk to me about it and what would be possible. So I was really pleased that they even tried. Also, who else have I tried? Sterling Crew tried from the food people. Tried him. We've tried a few that I won't mention because it might put them in an awkward situation.
Okay. No, we've got quite a list there, and of course, as always, if everyone here who's listening thinks that they know someone who would make a really good guest or a really good talking point, then
Cassie as well from Rent-A-Kill. I tried that. Tried her. Lots of people want. Sorry, Alex. Lots of people won't do it live.
It's not that scary. It's not that scary, guys. It's absolutely fine. Just out of interest, Majestic Wildlife Management says, "Can we get RAG on?" I can tell you, you've already got RAG on. On the long list of things that I do, what's it? So here you want the short list of the committees that I sit on. So BPCA Exec, BBC Outreach and Comms, the RRAC, which is the European Resistance Initiative, the RRAG, which is the UK Resistance Initiative, the Crew Best Practice Working Group, and I'm on the Crew Island board. So yeah, all of those in one. That's you're getting a multi in one go. And of course, over there we've got the one of the directors of the MPTA, and when Sean's on, we've got the owner of the what was it, the UK Pest
British Pest Register.
British Pest Register.
Yeah.
Between the three of us, I think we've got most bases covered. So yes. Anyway, let's call it a live tonight. You got an extra 15 minutes free, guys, which was tremendously good fun. But until next week,
take care, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Beauties and Beasties podcast.